Well, dear guests and experts of the Moscow Urban Forum 2017, and welcome. I'm delighted to be here to present the panel on ecology, and it's called To Be Seen or To Seem, Ecology in the Metropolis. This topic would have been regarded as rather exotic a couple of decades ago. After all, the cities are primarily regarded as cultural and economic entities, as we've already heard in this conference today. They exist above all else for human benefit. But in recent years, it has become clear that cities use the bulk of the world's resources, and they greatly contribute to a deterioration of the world's environment. Also, some of the world's large cities suffer from a lack of green spaces and vegetation, and from major pollution problems. City people the world over are demanding better living conditions for themselves, and meanwhile, environmental groups are campaigning for a sustainable relationship between cities and our host planet Earth. An urbanizing world demands a fundamental reorientation of cities and how they use resources and what sort of habitat they offer to their populations. Can we move beyond the slogans and get real about urban sustainability and livability? These are existential issues for present, but above all else also for future generations, our children and their children. And I'm delighted that we have 90 minutes to discuss these important issues here. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Hansen. Could you please come to the platform? So C40 is what you represent here, which is a hugely important international organization. And so my question to you is, has been a major player in the field of urban sustainability for many years. From London, as we heard this morning, it has spread its wings across to 50 countries. Its important role in climate change mitigation and adaptation initiatives is unquestioned. From your perspective, what tools allow to achieve the compromises and coordination between all sectors in the field of sustainable development of the environment? Over to you.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I want to say good afternoon to everyone. I'm incredibly happy to be here. I'm also happy to have been given this really inspiring question that I will answer now, and I have a few slides to help me doing that. I think the theme of this session is a really inspiring one, because we're talking about to be or to seem. And I think what we're hinting at with this title is it enough that we have great slogans, great eco-slogans, or is it really now the time to turn such slogans into action on the ground? And thinking about last year, which was the warmest year ever recorded in human history, and then the year before that, which was also the warmest year ever recorded in human history, thinking about great cities like Moscow, like Copenhagen, where I'm from, like New York, many others that are already experiencing the consequences of climate change, droughts, extreme weather, heat waves. We really do need to go from eco-slogans to action on the ground. And I think I have a positive message to bring all of you today, because looking at cities like Moscow, cities like Johannesburg, cities like Stockholm, cities like Beijing, they are doing a lot, not just to seem, but actually to actually turn climate change into action. That's what I'm going to talk about now. C40 represents more than 90 of the world's greatest cities, the largest cities, the mega cities. And looking at the numbers, you can see what 90 cities are able to do. 90 cities that represent, or that are part of C40, they represent more than a quarter of the global economy and 650 million people. So clearly when they act, it has a global impact. This is our chair. It's Anne Hidalgo. She's the mayor of Paris. And C40 as an organization was founded by mayors. It's driven by mayors. And in this quote, you can see what it is that makes C40 special to mayors. It's the fact that even though they represent very different cities, they're all facing similar types of challenges. And rather than having to reinvent the wheel every time, they can learn from each other, they can take inspiration from each other. Sometimes the best advice you get is from a colleague who has already found a solution to the problem, and that's what's in this quote. Now, there is a real urgency. We've made research in C40 together with Arab, showing what is it cities will need to do in order to turn the ambitions of the Paris Agreement into action on the ground. The Paris Climate Agreement, which said we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level. And as you can see, all cities will need, within the next 3 to 4 years, they will need to start bending the curve, meaning that emissions can no longer go up. They will have to start coming down. This takes a lot of action on the ground. I'm trying to change my slide here. And this slide shows what exactly it is they must do also if we look ahead. If C40 cities stayed on the same trajectory as currently, if they do no more than they're already doing, in 10 years' time, they would have used up their entire carbon budget, the CO2 emissions they could safely emit before we are breaking the boundaries of the Paris Agreement. And if they still don't take any further actions, those 90 cities that are part of C40 would actually have used up the entire world's carbon budget by 2060. And there's another reason why cities must act quickly, because they're already facing the consequences of climate change, whether you're talking storms, droughts, too much water, a lack of water. This is already happening in cities. It has real consequences. And we actually have research in C40 showing that 70% of C40 cities report that already they're feeling the consequences of climate change and that the citizens are suffering from climate change and that they need to take action. But there's another reason why cities are taking action, because acting on climate change is also creating better conditions. It's creating more jobs. It's creating healthier cities, more livable cities. And I think we have a beautiful example in Moscow, the My Street project, which I'm sure you've all seen, the way that sidewalks are being transformed, the way that there's going to be less space for cars and more space for walking. This project is very good in order to tackle climate change because it brings people out of their cars and onto their feet or even their bicycles. But it's clearly also very good for Moscow. It's turning the city greener. It's making it more livable, more pleasant to live in. So there are co-benefits to taking climate action, and that's another reason why cities are doing it. Now, cities are ready to act, but they cannot do it alone. And I think having a forum like this one shows exactly that point. So many partners are needed. Academic partners from other organizations like ICLEI, from government, from finance, from business. Without building a very broad coalition, there's no way that we can ever tackle a problem as significant as climate change. One thing that cities are doing is they're sharing knowledge with each other. So through 17 networks within C40, cities are taking advice from each other. How can you accelerate action on the ground? How can you turn eco-slogans and aspirations into reality? But cities are also collaborating with businesses and investors and many other partners. And in C40, we have a pilot project, something we call the City Solutions Platform, where 4 cities, Melbourne, Sydney, Rio, and Seattle, they have identified a challenge. They don't know exactly what the solution is. And then they are asking different stakeholders, different businesses, both local and global, if they might help come up with innovative solutions to such challenges. But really what is most important here is city leadership. And again, I think Moscow is a great example of this. First of all, we are very proud to have Moscow as one of our 90 cities, but also in the way that Moscow is working with cities in the entire Russian Federation to also inspire them to take more action, to tackle climate change and create more sustainable and livable cities. And there will be a climate change forum taking place in Moscow in August, which will do exactly that, convene cities from all over the Russian Federation to tackle such problems. Now, this, I think, is the really, really inspiring point that is made in the C40 Deadline 2020 research. Cities can really do a lot here. What our research shows is that if all cities with a population above 100,000, if they follow the trajectory that was shown on my previous slides, if they make sure that they start capping their emissions, that they bend the curve, if they make sure that by 2050 they have net zero emissions, then they can actually deliver 40% of what is needed to turn the goals of the Paris Agreement into reality. And I think if all of us in this room, if we all have a spirit of collaboration and working with each other, if we are all open to and listening to each other's ideas, then I'm sure that we will move way beyond eco-slogans and actually see lots of action taking place on the ground. Because this is all about walking the talk, not talking the talk. And I think a forum like this is a beautiful example of how that can be done. And I'll be looking forward to discussing this with all of you in a minute in the panel. Thank you.
Yeah, so one question from me to you, then we'll let you go. Now, you primarily represent the world's largest cities, but is that the inevitable outcome of development on the planet, or do we also need to look at intermediate-sized cities as a key part of where humanity is going? Not just mega cities of 10 or 20 million people, but cities of a few 100,000, maybe a couple of million people. What do you think?
No, I think that's a very good point. This is not only about mega cities, the largest cities, the most wealthy cities of the world. This is about all cities, and the numbers are striking when you think about it. In 2008, for the first time in human history, more than half of the world's population lived in city, for the very first time in human history. And the projections now for 2050 is that by 2050, we expect 70% to live in cities. But bear in mind, not mega cities.
Yeah.
Also the intermediate cities, the smaller cities. So clearly what's important, coming back to the point about collaboration, is that mega cities, intermediate cities, smaller cities, that there is a real sense of collaboration and sharing good ideas so that what works in one city can also be replicated in another city. And I think that moves way beyond the mega cities of this world.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. Thank you very much. So please take your seat. I would like to now invite the whole panel to come and join us on the platform here. So if you could, steps over there or here, either way, you could come up. So we have, first of all, Mr. Emani Kumar, Deputy Secretary of ICLEI, the World Regional Director of ICLEI in Southeast Asia. Please welcome Mr. Kumar. Then we have Professor Ricardo Valentini, Nobel Prize laureate, who is Professor of Forest Ecology at the University of Tuskegee. We have Anton Kubalchevsky, Head of Department of Environmental Management and Protection, Moscow City Government. We have Regina Günther, Senator for the Berlin Department of the Environment, Transport and Climate Protection. We have Ekaterina Radionova, who is CEO of Petromax Recycling here in Moscow. We have got Kate Field, Manager for Science and Research in New York. And we have Thomas Auer, climate and engineering expert from TransSolar. So that's our panel. Delighted that you're all here. We have a limited amount of time, but certainly it's wonderful that you are here. And I would like to first of all ask Mr. Kumar to take the platform.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator, for giving this chance to speak. Thanks, Simon, for setting the tone. I represent an organization called ICLEI. Simon was mentioning about this organization. We are an association of nearly 1,500 cities. I think one of the point what the moderator has talked about, the small cities, the medium cities, the counties, and we are coming from all over the world, actually more than 100 countries these cities come from. And as Simon said that almost most of the cities, I'll say that they're doing action on ground. It's not just only the slogans what they're talking about. They're talking about, they're working on low carbon initiatives. They're working on biodiversity related issues. They're working on public transportation. I think Moscow was shown, Copenhagen is one of the cities. A lot of Indian cities where I come from looking into smart cities. So most of the cities in the world, as Simon was saying, and since morning everybody is saying that the population is living, so the city governments are really acting on these activities. Either you talk about mass transportation systems, or you're talking about building energy efficiency systems, or you're talking about ecology-related topics, you're talking about water supply, you're talking about waste initiatives. If you take any subject related to a city, most of the cities, I'm happy to tell here, maybe most of the national governments are not doing these activities, but the city governments are really doing on these particular initiatives. So not just the slogans, I'm happy to report the city's initiatives. We, ICLEI, is really helping the city governments on various tools. Either you talk about carbon emission inventories, we have ClearPath is one tool, we have Heat Plus is another tool, which most of the Asian cities are really using that. It's okay. And we have so many tools related to the transportation. We have tools related to the urban biodiversity. It's like local action for biodiversity lab tool, local action for biodiversity for the wetlands. We also have tools related to the integrated urban water management and tools related to economy, tools related to the low carbon solutions, and also on the climate adaptation. So ICLEI is really helping the city governments to monitor, to actually even assess the situation within the city, how much emissions are they are releasing, or how much really they're contributing towards the, on the ecological related issues. And also maybe whatever the situation in the water supply, and as I said, also the solid waste related issues on that. So we help the cities, these tools. We also helping them to work on ground, as some of the projects, as I already said, that building energy efficiency is the major thing is coming up in most of the cities in the world, and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions coming out of those building energy utilization. A lot of, I don't know how many of you know, that transportation is the major contributor. And a lot of cities, even the developing country cities, are also putting initiatives on non-motorized transportation or mass transportation related issues. So these are the various things the cities are started doing, converting the action, the slogans into the actions. And I'm happy, along with C40, ICLEI is helping the city governments to bring it. Two more points, I just want to bring it up. Paris Agreement is one thing, I think one of the major breakthrough on the climate change related activities. And also on the biodiversity, I'll say that the ACHI targets came up in the 11th or 10th or 11th biodiversity COP, asking the city governments to work or act on various biodiversity related issues. So either you take up the climate COP or you take up the biodiversity COP, cities have a major role to play. And at the same time, I also want to say that both the national governments or the provincial governments or the local governments, they have to work hand in hand. I think unless until if you do a vertical integration of these activities or these actions, cities may not be. I think the second panel session, actually, I was told that Moscow as an independent city, but most of the other cities are really depending on the national government. So unless until you bring all together, all the levels of government, either national or provincial or the local governments, in one line, an integration, vertical integration on this, maybe cities are not, may not get money or may not have money to go ahead and implement these activities. So we are contributing, and I'm happy that cities are really showing. And I'll say that by 2050, cities will show to the national governments also that they can act fast, and maybe those are the lessons for the national governments on that. I just want to stop here.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. So you've been, as an organization, active and at the forefront of the campaign for sustainable and livable cities for 25 years now, which is remarkable. In this period, urban sustainability has become mainstream across the world. But are we heading for an urban world that we can confidently look forward to in the future in terms of true sustainability?
Thanks, moderator, for this question. I think I don't have any doubt to say yes to that particular answer. As I already said, that most of the cities are implementing those sustainable initiatives. As I work with nearly 1,500 odd cities through this organization, I can tell you more than 1,000 odd cities are really showcasing their carbon emission inventories through some of the platforms what we talk about along with ICLEI and C40. So I don't know how many of the national governments, if you talk about 100, 190 national governments, how many of them have really shown what is their assessment or what is their inventory, but cities are really showing that there is an inventory of carbon emissions which they can show it. And at the same time, not just only these inventories, but they're also started working on those inventories. They started creating action plans to reduce those carbon emissions in these cities. So I'm happy to say here, 2017 on 6th of July, the cities in the world are really working on it. And they may be, I think you don't have to wait till 2050, but even before, they will really show actions on ground. And we all, I think the citizens should support those initiatives. And obviously, it's a collective responsibility as the citizens, the local governments, as well as with the national government and provincial governments.
Well, thank you very much for Mr. Kumar. Very enlightening words from you. So I'm really pleased now to introduce Professor Ricardo Valentini, who is Professor for Forest Ecology. And it's over to you.
Thank you and good afternoon, Dobry dia. Well, I think the question is really intriguing. To be or to seem is a really appropriate question. I would like to make, of course, two answers, and both are to be and not to seem. Okay, that's of course, obviously. To be first, because we are now in a very accelerated time where population is growing as fast as never before. I was born in 1959, and I am the first generation to see doubling population in my life, in all over the human history. And so that's an acceleration of pressure on natural resources, acceleration on use of materials, and the solutions are not so fast compared to the acceleration of our demand. And that's the first point. So we have to be, not just to see. We have to really take this point. And probably we have to change also our paradigm. I mean, I call this the linear economy paradigm. That is the old economy, where you have the interest in the production, full stop. You have a product, and your work is finished there when you sell the product. Today we have to really answer the question, well, this product, where it will go, how we can reuse the product, how can we put again back in the market, in the economy. And this is what is called today circular economy, that is absolutely important. We have to take this, particularly in urban areas where there is a metabolism of energy and materials, and it's really a waste if we don't recycle this. There are many examples today. Like, for example, the food waste. It's 40% of the food we waste and go into the landfills in most of the big cities. We have to bring back this food to at least to soil fertility. Why don't we use this waste to create compost and maybe produce gas and maybe produce energy again back, or even extract water from this? It's possible. It's a lot of fresh food with a lot of water inside that can be extracted with technologies. And so there are many examples, or even examples that are real economy, because this is another point, that second point, a second answer. Yes, we have to be, because there is an economy, because there is a market, there is possibility of new jobs for young generation, and this is why we have to rapidly enter into this new circular economy. I make an example. In Milan, there is a fashion company that use rubber tires from trucks to create bags. And these bags are very fashionable, and you can buy a delivery at 2 times the cost of normal ladies' bags. And this is an example of what we call upcycling, so bringing a raw material back to the level even at higher value. So there are many examples like this that, or even house efficiency. I mean, there are now new social house projects with buildings that are 30% less energy demand, 30% of lower cost, because materials are new, are better constructed, and even are more fashionable. And this is another component that is very important, including also the fashion of the new trends. I mean, electrical cars. Again, it's not just an ethical choice. It's just because they are better. There is beautiful design. They are made with the most modern technology. So, I mean, we have to accelerate this. And so there is a big responsibility of policy and governance, I would say, more than science in some way. We have some solutions. And so I want to close just to say that maybe the science has to do a step forward in understanding multidisciplinarity in response to this question. So we probably don't use all the science all together in an integrated way. So we need more holistic approaches, particularly look at the urban problem and also technologies. This may be something that is still missing, but again, we need to really accelerate this process of changing from linear to circular economy.
Well, Professor Valentini, I completely share this perspective, and I think I've addressed this in quite a bit of writing that I've done myself. But one specific question I have, which is, as a professor of forest ecology, can you tell us how the resource demands of cities are affecting forest ecosystems across the world? And what can cities learn from observing the self-sustaining forest ecosystems that exist in different climatic zones across the planet?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because we are used to speak about tropical deforestation as something happening per se, you know, something that's mostly driven by land grabbing for agriculture. But indeed, there is also the request of natural material, of wood materials from, let's say, developed countries, that they put a lot of pressure. Again, we are again in the linear process of economy. We need to rethink this and reuse the material. For example, reusing wood. It's a very, very fascinating, and it's possible. Wood is one of the most long-living organic material we have on the earth. You can have wood that lasts for 500 years. Take, for example, the Stradivari violins. They are there for almost forever. I mean, I don't hear that there are Stradivari violins decomposed yet. So that's really to give the sense of why it's important, for example, wood as a carbon sequestration material. So again, urban infrastructure, green infrastructure, is very important also to take into account the possibility to expand carbon sequestration, to reduce the pollution, clean the air, and actually also value this service of urban forest. And I think it's a good example indeed.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Valentini. Now, the next speaker is Anton Kubalchevsky, head of the Department of Environmental Management and Protection here in Moscow. So it's over to you.
Уважаемые друзья, очень рад вас приветствовать на нашей московской земле. Большое спасибо всем гостям, что вы нашли время в своем сложном рабочем графике, приехали в наш прекрасный, бурно развивающийся, меняющийся город. Сегодня мы с вами обмениваемся, опять же, опытом, обмениваемся мнениями, по поводу развития городских агломераций. И, конечно, тема устойчивого развития этих агломераций, тема экологической устойчивости, она тоже сегодня звучит. Я вот позволю себе привести буквально несколько тезисов, ну и остановлюсь, опять же, их прокомментирую на примерах нашей московской жизни. Наверное, первый тезис – это то, что рост городов по агломерационному типу уже идет довольно-таки давно. Все это понимают, но понимание того, что экосистемные услуги определяют качество жизни жителей мегаполисов, они на самом деле приходят не во всех городах, не во всех агломерациях и не сразу. То есть вот сейчас идет процесс, скажем так, формирования только этого сознания. Поэтому я считаю, что у нас в Москве, по крайней мере, это сознание уже формируется, и мы уже четко понимаем, куда нам двигаться. Но второй тезис, что из 17 основных целей Организации Объединенных Наций для целей устойчивого развития, 9 из них уже, скажем так, в них звучит тема охраны окружающей среды. И в самостоятельную цель, конечно, вынесены устойчивые города и населенные пункты. Это очень важно. И главная идея, то, что города должны, скажем так, сохранять и восстанавливать свои экосистемы. Вот в этом смысле, наверное, скептики могут мне возразить и сказать, ну, о чем вы говорите, в чем здесь крупный мегаполис и живая природа, где вы это видите? Ну, вот наш город, например, нам повезло так, что мы исторически развивались как столичный город, у нас транспорт отставал, наверное, от всех мировых трендов, промышленность присутствовала в городе, но нам удалось сохранить, скажем так, девственные природные территории. Это наши зеленые легкие, мы ими гордимся. У нас, если взять старую Москву, то 18% старой Москвы – это, можно сказать, наше, скажем так, природное богатство, которое мы сохранили. Это и водоболотные угодья, это и леса, и различные луговые биотопы, в том числе на них обитают различные виды животных, птиц, рыб. И это на самом деле все в мегаполисе. Вот это очень важно. Ну и, конечно, мы, скажем так, следуем примерам Берлина, Осло, Копенгагена, Гонконга, но еще и других городов, где тоже этим очень сильно активно начали заниматься. Ну и, конечно, мы говорим о том, что мы будем это сохранять и приумножать, потому что если мы это уничтожим в угоду, опять же, каким-то, может быть, непонятным целям и принципам, нам потом очень дорого все это будет восстанавливать. В этом смысле город, на мой взгляд, очень успешный и считается по праву один из самых зеленых мегаполисов мира. Ну и третий тезис о том, что рост городов – это не катаклизм. Большие города способны устойчиво развиваться, это доказывает современный момент. Если процесс урбанизации разумно спланирован и эффективно организован, то он сможет стать значимым инструментом для достижения целей устойчивого развития. В этом тоже в Москве есть, скажем так, определенный потенциал. У нас объем жилищного, скажем так, строительства сейчас увеличивается, растет население, растет количество рабочих мест. Если взять, например, новую Москву, всего лишь вот 5 лет недавно, скажем так, прошло, мы отмечали присоединение новых территорий к Москве, это и есть уже агломерационный принцип развития. За 3 года было создано около 100 тысяч новых рабочих мест на этой территории. Это говорит о том, что тоже, скажем так, мы по этому принципу развиваемся. Ну а в чем же потенциал улучшения окружающей среды? Он, конечно, зависит от экологизации всех отраслей городского хозяйства. Наш департамент, наши эксперты экспертно оценивают все эти решения с точки зрения экологического эффекта, это тоже очень важно. Ну, если мы говорим, допустим, о эффективности экологической транспортной политики, то уже вот все мероприятия, которые мы сделали, мы еще не закончили транспортную реформу, транспортную программу, она у нас в самом, можно сказать, развитии, но тем не менее мы уже, экологи, можем ее признать состоявшейся и эффективной, потому что количество вредных выбросов от автотранспорта у нас снизилось практически в 2 раза. Это за 6 лет. Это говорит о том, что мы находимся на правильном пути. Ну и, как я уже говорил, что сейчас пока мы традиционные меры в городе реализовываем, да, которые в том числе в разных мегаполисах уже были реализованы, что-то приземлилось на московскую почву, что-то нет. Но очень важно, что будущее все-таки за технологиями. Да? Мы об этом еще раз повторим и скажем, что наступит точка, когда традиционные меры уже не будут действовать, и все равно экологические, экономические, скажем так, зеленые вот эти вот все вещи должны будут выйти на первый план, и к этому, конечно, надо быть готовыми. И уже начинать это делать прямо сейчас. Но если говорить, что какие технологии новые у нас появились в рамках благоустройства городских территорий, какие экологические показатели, ну, все, наверное, знают, что в Москве за последние годы было создано 400 парков, новых парковых территорий, очень много общественных пространств. Город открылся для пешеходов, пешеходное пространство сокращается. Конечно, автолюбителям это не совсем нравится, но люди быстро привыкают к изменениям и оценивают их. Вот сейчас вот опять идет очередной этап программы «Моя улица». Есть определенные неудобства. Город в каких-то местах, центр города, скажем так, затруднен для передвижения, перемещения. Но, поверьте мне, пройдет еще буквально 1,5 месяца, откроются улицы, и люди выйдут и скажут: большое спасибо, что вы сделали такую красоту, что мы можем ходить, гулять, общаться и любоваться теми красотами, которые мы раньше даже не видели. Вот это тоже очень важно. Ну и теплоэнергетика тоже. За 5-летний период выбросы от объектов теплоэнергетического комплекса в нашем городе сократились на 30%. Тоже говорит о том, что все мероприятия, которые мы предпринимаем, они дают положительный эффект. Тезис 4. Важны гибкие механизмы постройки под реальность. То есть мы говорим о том, что в городе сейчас уже мало в Старой Москве новых территорий для высадки зеленых насаждений, для создания. Мы только видим промзоны, у нас, слава богу, есть потенциал. И мы готовы количество зелени в Старой Москве увеличить на 5-6% за счет реорганизации промышленных зон. Но у нас, еще раз говорю, такая возможность есть. Хочу привести пример акцию «Миллион деревьев». Это акция, которая призвана улучшить качество и количество зеленых насаждений непосредственно в московских дворах. То есть мы приближаем непосредственно озеленение уже с улиц, площадей, магистралей непосредственно в московские дворы. Здесь мы инициативу полностью отдали жителям, сняли все бюрократические препоны. Голосовать за озеленение можно на интернет-порталах, таких как «Активный гражданин». Представляем полностью весь посадочный материал. И вот сегодня мне было очень приятно, когда я давал интервью одному из телеканалов, подошел человек, пожал мне руку и сказал: Антон Олегович, спасибо вам, что озеленили наш двор. Это на самом деле приятно мне, как москвичу, как экологу, что мы на самом деле на правильном пути. Это такая народная акция, эта инициатива идет снизу. Ни в коем случае власть не навязывает. Породный состав, даже 80 наименований различных деревьев, кустарников, мы предлагаем на выбор. Жители смотрят картинки, если забыли, как выглядит, допустим, куст жасмина или сирени, можно посмотреть. Все это очень показательно. И на самом деле за 3 года мы треть московских дворов, это около 10 тысяч дворов, мы озеленили, то есть улучшили качество зелени в этих дворах, высадили 1 800 000 деревьев и кустарников. То есть это, на самом деле, такая колоссальная цифра. И самое главное, что жители вместе с нами, вместе с властью и общественными организациями участвуют в озеленении своего двора. Это пробуждает, во-первых, сознательность, ответственность населения. Но это делает, скажем так, нашу работу общей. 5-й тезис, что сегодня много говорят, что город должен быть умным. Но мы, экологи, всегда говорим, что умный город – это зеленый город. Мы не разделяем эти понятия, но зеленый город – это все-таки город не где только испытываются, скажем так, современные информационные технологии, но где, опять же, сохраняется живая природа, люди занимаются энергоэффективностью и внедряют в том числе экологические зеленые технологии. В этом смысле Москву можно назвать зеленым городом, по крайней мере, мы к такому стремимся. Ну и тоже важный тезис: экология – это сфера, где важен и заметен вклад каждого жителя. У нас каждый год мы фиксируем такую активность наших жителей. У нас количество жителей, которые в экологических акциях принимают участие, растет в геометрической прогрессии. Если даже взять вот просто пример акции «Час земли», которая в Москве проходит, в 2011 году начинал ее проводить, 60 зданий всего лишь отключало подсветку, то в 2016 это уже было более 1600 зданий. Но по всему миру уже более 2 миллиардов человек принимает участие в этой акции, поэтому мы полностью ее поддерживаем. Или акция, допустим, «Работа на велосипеде». Если у нас фиксировалось в 2014 году только 50 тысяч велосипедистов, люди, которые перемещались по городу, то в этом году уже 500 тысяч велосипедистов пользуются услугами велопрокатов и всего остального. То есть динамика на самом деле колоссальная, и, конечно, вклад каждого жителя, каждого представителя, скажем так, нашего города, он тоже очень важен. Ну и у нас сейчас, опять же, наверное, еще одна мысль, что вот этот вот спрос жителей, да, то есть инициатива, запрос, он опережает в том числе зачастую законодательные нормы и действия власти. То есть жители нас опережают, высказывают нам пожелания, а мы уже, скажем так, в дальнейшем начинаем реализовывать те или иные проекты. Ну и, наверное, тезис 7, что Москва единственный пока что еще город в Российской Федерации, я сегодня уже об этом говорил, участник партнерства крупных городов в борьбе с изменениями климата СИ-40. Мы с 2006 года, то есть с момента основания этого партнерства присутствуем. Москва была одним из инициаторов, активно обмениваемся данными. За этот период мы получили, вдумайтесь только, 10 тысяч полезных решений, которые в том числе были реализованы в других мегаполисах мира, членов партнерства. Мы получили, скажем так, колоссальный опыт, колоссальный набор технических решений, таких как коммуникатор, да, можно брать просто и делать. Вот, уже все готово. Есть опыт, есть оценки, и, конечно, это нам очень сильно помогает, вот, потому что мегаполисы, общение между мегаполисами, оно не политизировано, это раз. Задачи все созвучны, это два. Ну, наверное, третье, что все-таки мегаполис — это уже интернациональная агломерация, где уже интересы, скажем так, вот, по политике такой большой, они стираются, потому что наша основная цель делать, скажем так, развиваться в агломерации, насколько я вижу, и делать их все-таки устойчивыми. Вот это основная наша задача, и Москва в этом смысле не исключение. Мы, конечно, двигаемся и развиваемся по агломерационному принципу и следуем принципам устойчивого развития. Спасибо вам большое за помощь, которую вы нам оказываете.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kubalchevsky, and thank you for your enthusiasm and also your commitment to these important issues. I think we probably have to move on to our next speaker, from Moscow to Berlin. And I'd like to introduce Regine Günther, the senator in the Berlin Department for the Environment, Transport and Climate Protection. So over to you, Mrs. Günther.
So thanks very much. I'm really delighted to be today here with you, and that gives me the opportunity to speak about our plans to, let me say, perhaps reinvent not only the infrastructure, but to reinvent Berlin during the next 5 years. I'm now in charge since 6 months as a senator, and we have the aspiration to make Berlin more mobile, healthier, more climate friendly, and safer. And in order to do that, I would like to explain that in 3 areas. What we heard today is that, especially in cities, the transport sector is key. So we have to modify the transport sector significantly. We should move away to put the car in the middle of our thinking, and we should aim to create an intelligent network for all modes of transport. Therefore, Berlin especially, we have the plans to invest huge amounts of money into new infrastructure, what you have already mentioned for cyclists. That means in the next 4 years we would like to invest 200 million euros only for new cycle pathways, and a considerable amount of money into the public transport system. Perhaps you assume that is a kind of administrative or the aspiration from the administration, but this is not what most recent polls shows us. Most recent polls shows us that we are doing what the Berlin citizen is asking us. 60% of the population is expecting from the government to put most money into public transport and to put even more money into the new cycling infrastructure. Perhaps you're asking, what is the role of a car in this new mobility system? For us, the car obviously do have an important place in this transport mix, but we are talking about clean cars. We are talking about electromobility, and therefore we are accelerating to establish the infrastructure for electric cars in order to be able to replace the combustion engine. Our hope is that from 2030 onwards, no car with conventional combustion engine will be sold to the market. So that should be stopped. That is where we try to push our new federal government in this direction. A new mobility or new Berlin Mobility Act will lay the, or will be the legal framework for all this change. The second area, what is pretty important to us, we have heard that cities can contribute considerably to make the economy more climate friendly. We would like to be a kind of model city. Therefore, the Climate Paris Agreement will lead our ambition and our action. That means we would like to be climate neutral by 2050, and by 2070 we have phased out lignite into an energy mix, and by latest 2030 hard coal will be phased out, so that only gas or renewable energy will be part of our energy system. I think that is pretty new, and we need a whole range of measures to make that happen. We have passed a new law, the Energy Climate Protection Program, and that implies more than 100 climate protection measures. The purpose of all this is to reduce CO2 and greenhouse gases as soon as possible. Last not least, what is key for the new government is Berlin at the moment is a green city. Berlin has historic parks, we have extensive woodland areas and lakes, and we have 400,000 roadside trees. We would like to preserve that green treasure, and therefore we are creating a whole program, what is called the Charter for a Green Berlin. We are starting an open debate with the society, because we think we will not succeed if we do not involve the public and all the civil society groups. How this valuable resource can be preserved. I will launch a program for 1,000 green roofs. At the moment we have 400 hectares of green roofs in Berlin, but this is only 3.9%. So there's much more possible, and there's a huge potential. So to conclude here, we have huge programs to make Berlin more livable. We would like to share our experience with all of you. I was really excited what I heard from Moscow, our partner city, and I'm really hoping that we can go into a very close exchange in order to learn from each other. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Günther. Now, like Moscow, Berlin is a boom city, and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 has made it a major tourist attraction and a major economic growth hub. So how is Berlin's rapid growth being handled without major environmental repercussions? Could you let us know, please?
Well, I have tried to explain how we are doing that in the different areas, but what I should stress, I think, is what I mentioned before, that the method, how we are doing is that. It's not a top-down approach. We try to do as much as possible a bottom-up approach. That is, we have established, for example, for our new Mobility Act, a wide range, or a group with a wide range of civil society, and they are all part of that, creating that act. All their ideas will be part of that new law, and so it's not that the administration is presenting their ideas. If we present something, the civil society, parliamentarians, and all the society was already included. That means it's not one against the other. It means we are all together doing that. And that ensures an acceptance, what we have not seen before. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting indeed. And now we're going to move across the Atlantic to New York. And I would like to invite Kate Field, who is the manager for science and research of New York Parks, and she will tell us about the extraordinary transformation of the former landfill Fresh Kills into a park. And maybe you will also tell us a little bit about where that waste ends up instead that used to be dumped there.
Well, first I just want to say thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to visit the city of Moscow and to participate in this conversation with all of you. So, as was just said, I work in a sort of different sphere than most, of transforming some of our post-industrial spaces into sort of productive ecological areas. And this is really vital because, of course, in our urban regions, we have a lot of these post-industrial spaces that really, could be used for real ecological function. So the Fresh Kills landfill is on the western shore of Staten Island. I actually have slides. All right. There it is. You can see this is what the space used to look like. Basically giant hills of trash. But it doesn't look like this now. If you go there now, you'll see something more like this. So big rolling grassland hills, some tidal creeks and wetlands. Here's a nice snowscape. You can maybe picture yourself doing some cross-country skiing or snowshoeing. And to put this into context, we're within New York City. We're on the sort of southwestern region of New York City, on the west shore of Staten Island, one of the boroughs of New York City, along with Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens. And Fresh Kills Park is huge. In relation to Central Park, it's actually 2.7 times the size. It's about 900 hectares. If you put it on the bottom of Manhattan, it would actually stretch all the way from the tip of the Battery up to 26th Street. And for those of you less familiar with Manhattan, this is sort of what it looks like in Moscow. So this is a very big space. And I want to just give you a brief history of what this looked like and how it came about, and sort of then what we're doing now and what we're thinking about as the ecological needs of this space into the future, and how that fits into the metropolitan area of New York City. So if the Fresh Kills landfill filled in tidal creeks and wetlands, it was supposed to be a 3-year project, and that was to fill those in to make way for industrial and residential development. Of course, when you start putting all of New York City's waste somewhere, it becomes a little hard to stop. And so those 3 years turned into 53 years, and the Fresh Kills creeks turned into the Fresh Kills landfill. At its peak, it accepted 29,000 tons of trash per day, and this became the largest landfill in the world in its time. It was known as the largest man-made structure. And what it looks, there was a lot of pressure to close down the Fresh Kills landfill from the community, of course, and in 2001, a decision was finally made that it would shut down, and this was due to some political alignment between the borough president of Staten Island, the mayor of New York City, as well as the governor of New York State at the time. And there's a lot of community pressure, obviously, to shut this space down because it was a real ecological disaster right in the middle of a city, so this was right in a lot of people's backyards. And this is what it looks like today. So you can see 2 sections were actually closed in 1996 and 1997 because they had reached capacity. East Mound, over there on the right, is closed in 2011. And by closed, I mean a final cover and cap of the landfill. And West Mound is actually still being closed and is slated to be finished in 2019. So this is a within still construction project still, certainly. So the city had sort of this opportunity to say, we have this huge piece of land What can we do to actually turn it into something that's usable for the community and actually adds sort of ecological function to the region instead of all this ecological harm that it's been causing for over 50 years. So they decided to turn it into a park, and this is by no means the first landfill to park project, but it is the largest landfill to park project in the world. So they had a design competition, and that design competition was won by field operations headed by James Corner, and they were chosen to produce the draft master plan, which looks like this. The plan is actually to turn this site into 5 parks in one, with each of the former main landfill areas turning into its own park with its own types of amenities, and one central area with actual built development and amenities for visitors. So that's the sort of history of where the site got to now, but I mainly want to talk about the ecology of the site and how we're thinking of managing that into the future of park development. So if you're on the site now, there's a noticeable presence of past and present human activity. It's not just a fully pristine green space by any means. That being said, there's a number of habitats that are considered rare in the region and are already useful in their current state. And it's important to consider that as we move forward so that we're looking kind of right away at what already works in some of these spaces. So our historic ecosystem was all tidal wetlands and creeks, and this is what the entire site was before landfill operations. Now it's still actually a very large area of tidal wetlands and creeks. Of the 900 hectares of fresh kills, only 45% of it was actually used for landfill operations. So there's still a lot of habitat there that was somewhat untouched. And of course, now we know that these wetlands provide huge ecological benefits to the region. They filter sediment from stormwater runoff, and they also provide lots of flood control. And in fact, the western shore of Staten Island was significantly less hard hit by Hurricane Sandy than was the rest of Staten Island because these fresh kills wetlands absorb so much of that storm impact. But now our primary ecosystem is not wetlands anymore. All right, now we have this huge area of grasslands. So these grasslands are actually created as part of landfill closure. They're not really intentionally created as a grassland habitat. The grasses are planted merely to prevent erosion from rain after the landfill's capped. However, as a byproduct, you end up with an ecosystem that's now a hugely productive grassland in the middle of a very urban region and is not what you would expect in the region at all. This has become vital for migrating birds who migrate up and down the eastern seaboard as part of the Atlantic Flyway, and we have a number of rare grassland bird species that are nesting within this region. So it's really reshaping our ecosystem. This is now the largest grassland habitat in the entire Northeast. And this really just brings home what I want to stress, which is that, this is no longer a native ecosystem. This is a reclamation project, not a restoration project. We're not going to restore this into a huge space of tidal wetlands like it was 100 years ago, because all of those, millions of tons of trash are frankly not going anywhere. So we need to still, though, consider that that doesn't mean that it can't serve ecological use. These spaces can still have functions for the region. So it's also important to stress that the native ecosystem, what was there before, might not even be what we actually want to strive for. The habitat, of course, around this area has changed drastically over these 53 years of landfill operations as well. So it's important to consider that you kind of have to look at what's happening now to figure out what could work into the future as our climate changes and the situations around the site change. And I just want to end with saying that this is what brings the importance of having adaptive habitat management. And this really starts with doing a lot of environmental monitoring, seeing what's happening on the site, and then also assessing the habitat needs so that we're able to kind of incorporate those. And I do want to stress too that I don't just mean the habitat needs of that site, but of the entire city. On saying what can we add here that could provide these ecological functions to the region. And from that, creating an adaptive management plan, enacting that plan, and following it along the way in a constantly cyclical fashion so that we can always reevaluate. Our cities are going to be changing and they're going to keep changing, so we need to make sure that we also keep changing our strategies along the way. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Field, for this very instructive transformation story that you've given us. One quick question, it's not much time, but clearly that New York continues to dump a lot of waste. So where does it end up today? And is that being recycled, or is that going to be another problem somewhere else?
Yes, the answer is both. So New York City's waste now, much of it, the things that are still put into municipal solid waste are landfilled elsewhere. So it's by no means is it a fixed system. We still need to tackle the root cause of how we have these spaces by reducing our waste. And the City of New York is also doing a lot for that. Recycling is a huge component, clearly, but also New York City Department of Sanitation is implementing a citywide curbside organics waste collection program. So trying to see if we can, in a place even as big as New York, start to compost all of our organic material. We do this already in many regions, and as it expands, of course, the problems are who takes all of your compost. It's hard to find enough room in these large urban regions to even have this much composting. So the new plan is to try to bring that outside of the city limits and paying municipalities to do the composting. It's an ambitious project, but I'm hopeful it will be successful.
Thank you so much. Well, these are certainly critical issues. And this also brings us very neatly to our next presenter, because she's going to be talking about recycling. So it's Ekaterina Radionova, who is General Director of Petromangs Kuzakovsky Recycling Company. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Вначале хотелось бы поблагодарить за возможность представить деятельность нашей компании здесь и за интерес, который демонстрируют гости, особенно на такой панельной дискуссии, которая называется «Быть, а не казаться». И мы уже есть. Об этом, в общем-то, и будет мой короткий доклад. Компания Кулсаковский насчитывает более 100 лет и представлена в 10 странах и открыла более 100 площадок на всех своих дислокациях. Она строит заводы и открывает производство, основываясь на исследованиях собственной лаборатории, которая изучает новый компонентный состав отходов, который продуцирует человечество. И основными принципами открытия и действия этих площадок всегда это ответственность, безопасность и эффективность в первую очередь. Петромакс в России – это компания полного цикла, которая представляет и логистику, и переработку, и подготовку уже готового сырья для потребителя. Компания располагает весовыми комплексами, комплексами радиационного контроля, безопасными комплексами транспортировки и хранения, собственное дробильное и сортировальное оборудование различных назначений. Все это, собственно говоря, говорит о том, что оснащение компании совершенно и ничуть не отстает от оснащения любой площадки, которая работает во всех странах мира. Поговорим тогда об ответственности. К действующему бизнесу в Российской Федерации применимо большое количество требований, и это не зря. В первую очередь к таким компаниям, которые занимаются переработкой отходов, таких требований очень много. И это ответственность бизнеса, которая обеспечивает и безопасность для собственных работников, и безопасность для окружающей среды, и безопасность для населения, которое, собственно говоря, располагается непосредственно рядом. Компании обязаны мониторить собственные выбросы, различные эмиссии, создавать и согласовывать проекты, получать различные лицензии. Все это высокий уровень контроля и ответственности бизнеса и, собственно говоря, департаментов, которые контролируют нашу отрасль. А что же об ответственности, о которой затронули речи предыдущие ораторы, об ответственности товаропроизводителей, тех, кто производит вещи, которые мы с вами используем, а потом, собственно говоря, выбрасываем в отход? Все очень просто. Ответственность товаропроизводителя реализуется в максимальной возможности переработать собственный продукт, собственное оборудование практически на 100%. Но так ли это сейчас? Сейчас все заявляют о том, что это реализовано, но возьмем простой телевизор, который вот какая-нибудь LCD-панель, которая сейчас выходит в отход. Только чтобы развинтить и безопасно достать лампы с ртутным наполнением, которые присутствовали на том этапе развития телевизионной техники, нужно развинтить 154 винта, и это руками. Собственно говоря, а эти лампы, чтобы извлечь и безопасным образом утилизировать, нужно совершить практически 10 манипуляций, которые, опять же, не обходятся без ручного труда. При автомобильном производстве, не говоря уже о выбросах и всем прочем, только внутреннее наполнение пластиков содержит более 100 компонентов. Собственно говоря, а что говорить о других каких-то продуктах, которые мы держим у вас в руках, да, телефонах, планшетах, практически обо всем. Все это имеет сложный компонентный состав, огромное количество скреплений, сплавов. Все это достаточно тяжело и плохо рециркулируется. Но, опять же, тем не менее, мы повторимся о том, что такой подход – это подход общий, не только со стороны товаропроизводителей, не только со стороны бизнеса, но и, опять же, со стороны нас с вами. Мы должны выступать за разумное потребление и обязательно ответственно подходить к природопользованию. А здесь, собственно говоря, мы как компания несем определенную миссию в плане проведения лекций, семинаров для населения, для деток. И опять же, обязательно при поддержке правительства Москвы и Департамента природопользования участвуем в акциях популяризации раздельного сбора отходов. И опять же, как волонтеры, участвуем в подобного рода программах, связанных уже непосредственно с нашим городом, где мы дислоцируемся. Поэтому без ответственности со стороны нас с вами все это не будет никогда работать, потому что в первую очередь мы с вами сейчас, все, кто здесь присутствует, продуцируем и модифицируем пространство вокруг нас. Поэтому наша ответственность, она вот в этом и заключается. Как мы будем использовать, потреблять и производить продукт, вот такое у нас окружение и будет. В общем-то, все. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Radionova. Now, can you actually influence policy actively by the experience that you have and the problems that you have with recycling these complex products that you've just talked about? So can you influence government policy at national level, do you think? So that basically, the circular economy becomes mainstream rather than still as a peripheral issue?
Вы, наверное, удивитесь, но на сегодня да. Мы являемся действительными членами экспертных советов практически во всех профильных комитетах. И непосредственно мы являемся приглашенными экспертами для того, чтобы наше мнение, как практиков, было учтено в разработке всех каких-то директив и проектов. И на сегодня на 100% это работает.
That's very exciting and very promising. Thank you. So we have one more speaker, and we are getting close to running out of our time, unfortunately, because it's a very interesting discussion. So I would like to now invite Thomas Au, who is the climate engineering expert of a company called TransSolar. So please tell us about your work relating to the issue of climate and cities and renewable energy, I take it.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let me say that I'm very much convinced that every sustainable development has to be resilient, has to provide a bigger resilience at the same time. And so we need to think about how we can create this transformational process we need towards more sustainable city so that they also provide more resilience. So we became dependent on fossil fuels, we became dependent on central infrastructure, we became dependent on car mobility, and particularly car mobility is creating huge streets, and huge streets then absorb a lot of solar energy and create microclimate issues, which we see more and more. And so we need to think about also at the same time resilience and what creates a better quality of place. We found this image in a magazine where they said, welcome to the breathtaking Tokyo water park, where you can wash away the pressure and stress of the overcrowded city. We really like this image, but it shows us a lot. If we create environmental quality, architecture quality, people enjoy it, people use it, people go there, and it's not a waste of resources. So we need to think about this on all scales, and we need to be successful on all scales. And I have put together a few examples, but here, this is a school in Damascus. We could work without using air conditioning. We work with Atelier Lyon from France, using these chimneys to drive natural ventilation, use vegetation to create a nice microclimate for the, between the classrooms, buildings, but also for the indoor environment. And then also on a bigger scale, this is in a cold climate. This was a high-rise building in Winnipeg where we used these winter gardens to provide a nice microclimate inside the building, which we use to naturally ventilate the building or to use the sun to heat up the air while we distribute it through the building. And we use geothermal energy on site. And all of this reduced energy consumption from around 500 kilowatt hours per square meter down to less than 100 kilowatt hours per square meter. And creating a beautiful environment for the people. We have half of as many complaints in this building than the client has in other buildings. And then on a bigger scale in France, as I mentioned before, microclimate, we have this more frequent heat waves. And what we have seen in the summer of 2003 is that in all of Europe, about 70,000 people died as a result of an extreme heat wave. And France got hit the hardest, Paris got hit very hard. And so we had the chance to work with TVK architects on the remodeling of Place de la République. And this was Place de la République before. You see traffic is everywhere. You see the dark asphalt absorbing all this solar energy, heating up this place, make it unbearable in a heat wave. And so after remodeling, we organized traffic. We changed the surface so that we have a higher reflectivity so that the space doesn't heat up and creates an oasis for people where they can go in summer and really enjoy this environment. And then finally, we also worked on a master plan for Abuja in Nigeria together with Albert Speer architects from Frankfurt. And this was the strategy we started. We said, first we have to talk about the urban form, the master planning, and then we talk about the efficiency of the buildings, and then we talk about systems, and then we introduce renewable energy into the city, and how far can we get? And you see on those 4 steps, we got to almost 0 carbon emissions that would be possible for this city. But what was, when we were working ourselves through the costing, most amazing was the fact that the return of invest was after a little more than 5 years. So what we see is that if we are successful on all scales, like on a building scale, on an urban scale, on a system scale, we can provide better environments for people, but also on an economical basis, but we have to be successful on all scales.
Well, that was very concise. Thank you very much indeed. But very important work, clearly. I mean, remarkably so. But I have a question that I think is relevant to this discussion, which is the city that we have today, large, medium, or small, is basically powered by fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. And that is clearly one of the major climate issues that we have to address globally today. So in your work, have you done any assessment about whether or not even larger cities can actually be powered ultimately by renewable energy rather than by fossil fuel technology? This, I think, is a really existential question for humanity today.
Yeah.
Have you got an answer to that, please?
Okay, so first of all, let me say we always pretend as if cities are our biggest problems. Of course, cities are a challenge because of the density, but at the same time, we did a PhD study at the Technical University in Munich, which showed that the carbon emissions for a citizen in Munich compared to one living on a rural area in Bavaria is half as much. So the carbon footprint per person in the city is half of the one that is living in a rural area. So first of all, cities are a challenge because of the density, but they're also the solution at the same time. And of course, we know that using geothermal in combination, we have to energy efficiency of our buildings, reducing energy consumption significantly is key. But then if we achieve that, we showed this also in our study with Master City, if we achieve a reduction, a significant reduction of energy consumption in our buildings, we reduce the burden on our energy infrastructure to an extent that we are able to cover it with renewable sources. Yes?
Well, I would like to challenge that perspective a little bit, because what you've said is true in developed countries such as Germany and so on, where certainly rural living typically makes greater demands on energy resources than in urban living. But in developing countries like in China, India, and elsewhere, where people move from relatively self-sufficient local energy environments using mainly wood, into cities, typically the per capita resource consumption, and particularly the energy consumption, typically goes up 4 or 5-fold. So it's true what you're saying for developed countries, but it's not true what you're saying for developing countries.
Can I react?
Yes, please.
I mean, people consume goods, people consume energy, people consume food, and this is creating CO2 emissions, and it has to do with wealth. We have a higher wealth in our cities than the rural areas you described, and if you give people this wealth, they produce carbon. This is what, I mean, and this is like, we have to get people out of a poor environment at the same time. So we have to be successful on that level as well.
Okay, you would like to answer this question as well, or respond to it?
Yes, I just wanted to bring the perspective of a city like Hong Kong into the conversation. Hong Kong is a super dense megacity in China, but it's also a city that's shown that you can have wealth on the one hand and quite significant growth levels in economic wealth and reducing CO2 emissions at the same time. So in a megacity like Hong Kong, you can do both. And you find the same pattern in many megacities around the world, not only in the global north, also in the global south.
Yeah. Well, I think we have 1 or 2 questions that we haven't answered yet on the future of cities from a sustainability perspective, but we have certainly had a very rich and interesting discussion here this afternoon. So I would like to thank all our participants here on the panel for their really valuable contributions. So please, a big hand from the audience to our participants here on the stage. But the music is already on, but I'm not quite finished yet, sorry. So events like these are enormously valuable for formulating an agenda for action on urban sustainability. Whether an urbanizing world in which ever more people across the world demand ever higher standards of living can be truly sustainable, I submit, still remains to be seen. But this is not just an agenda, not just for city authorities and business, but also, very importantly, for national governments and for the international community. So I want to thank everybody who has contributed to this discussion. And I've also been asked to wish all guests and participants a productive day at the forum, and to say that events in the plenary today will continue soon after 5 o'clock here. And the topic is global projects of renovations as engines of metropolitan development, during which experts from Russia, Japan, and France will share their views on urban renovation projects. I'd also like to add a little ad for my own talk this evening at the March School of Architecture, which I called Creating Regenerative Cities rather than just sustainable cities. So if you are interested in the topics that we've been discussing here today, that's where the discussion on this broader issue will continue. And I'd like to finish with an observation looking at the audience here. Earlier on today, I saw mainly men in the audience. They are interested in making money. And whereas here, there's mainly women in this audience. And women typically tend to have to clean the mess that men have been making beforehand. So thank you for all of you being here. And I think it's really ultimately an issue of how women are interested in the human habitat that has come up in the discussion here. So thank you for being here, and thank you for participating, even if you haven't had much of a chance to speak. Bye-bye then. So can we swap cards?